CNN fired Marc Lamont Hill for anti-Semitic statements he made at the UN. This is from the New York Post, and following controversial Israeli comments, he has been fired. CNN fired liberal pundit Marc Lamont Hill on Thursday following controversial statements he made about Israel. They said, Marc Lamont Hill is no longer under contract with CNN. Speaking at a pro-Palestine meeting at the UN, on Wednesday, Hill called for a free Palestine from the river to the sea. All right, there's a couple things I want to talk about before reading through the rest of the story. There's a lot of people on the left who are demanding that the free speech activists come out in defense of Marc Lamont Hill. But CNN is a private company. They're allowed to have on whoever they want. If they don't want Marc Lamont Hill on their platform, they can remove him. Gee, sounds familiar? Here's the thing though, it actually is pretty different. Marc Lamont Hill said from the river to the sea. If you're not familiar with what that means, it's talking about the Jordan River to the Mediterranean Sea, and they want everything in between to not be Israel. Thus, many people who are Jewish and Israeli take issue with statements like that. Because of that, he has now been fired, okay? The other thing is, CNN pays contributors, okay? He was fired. It was a job. There is a difference between a company employing you and a platform like Twitter that welcomes everyone onto their platform to espouse their message. Twitter has rules. They don't enforce those rules impartially. They target specific people, like Sarah Jong is fine, Louis Farrakhan is fine, but Laura Loomer is not okay, right? Look, Farrakhan says a bunch of anti-Semitic things, they don't ban him. It's totally different. And this is why I'm not going to defend Marc Lamont Hill. Now look, I think if he wants to say these things about Israel, by all means he can, but CNN is going to fire him from his job because CNN is a publisher, not a platform. They have specific people and they curate the message that goes out on their TV network. And if he wants to say things about from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free, like if you want to say that, sure, okay. There's going to be consequences for that. You might lose your job. People lose their jobs all the time. Let's read on. The statement, which is sometimes said by the militant group Hamas and refers to extending Palestine's borders from the Jordan River to the Mediterranean Sea, is viewed by some as advocating for the destruction of the Jewish state. Those calling for from the river to the sea are calling for an end to the state of Israel. Sharon Nazarian, the Anti-Defamation League senior vice president for international affairs, told the Jewish Journal. Hill also works as a professor at Temple University in Philadelphia. The school stood by him on Thursday, saying in a statement, Marc Lamont Hill does not represent Temple University, and his views are his own. However, we acknowledge that he has a constitutionally protected right to express his opinion as a private citizen. Hill did not immediately return request for comment, but defended himself on Twitter. My reference to river to the sea was not a call to destroy anything or anyone. It was a call for justice, both in Israel and in the West Bank, Gaza. That's not an apology, Marc Lamont Hill. He says, I do not support anti-Semitism, killing Jewish people, or any of the other things attributed to my speech. I have spent my life fighting these things. So let me try and clarify what he means. So first, let me pull up this map here. I have a map, Google Maps here, of Israel. And here you have the Jordan River, right there. And here you have the sea. You might notice that Tel Aviv is in between the river and the sea. Look, the river extends pretty far, the Dead Sea, and you could theoretically, some people argue, you go from the river to the sea this way, and thus the entire state of Israel gets wiped out in that process. What it sounds like Marc Lamont Hill is saying, especially with this non-apology, look, it was not a call to destroy anything or anyone. It's a call for justice. Right, he's not saying destroy Israel, he's saying it should be under Palestinian control, this land. No, don't destroy it, just take it over, right? It's semantics. He didn't say anything about letting Israel exist. He just said, I don't want to destroy them. That sounds an awful lot like what we hear white nationalists say when they're like, what do they call it, a peaceful genocide? So this is the left wing's anti-Semitism once again coming to roost. Because we saw Alyssa Milano call out Linda Sarsour and Tamika Mallory for associating with Louis Farrakhan, who is an anti-Semite. We have seen Deborah Messing and other people associated with the Women's March telling Linda Sarsour and Tamika Mallory to step down, to back away, to apologize, and they sort of did. But it's even better than that, because apparently, in the Daily Caller, CNN contributor Marc Lamont Hill has history of questionable endorsements, because he apparently endorsed Louis Farrakhan. It's like, come on, man. So I don't know if this story is actually going to bring it up. Yes, it does. Straight up. There's an image of Farrakhan and Marc Lamont Hill. Okay, look. What he's saying is like the left-wing version of what the white identitarians say. Like, oh, they only associate with certain people who espouse these things, or they only talk to them. What's the problem? It's like, okay, that's fine. Why should he get a pass on the same thing? Louis Farrakhan's an anti-Semite. He says, they say, the Daily Caller, advocating for the violent end of Israel is apparently part of a larger trend for CNN's Marc Lamont Hill, who also has a history of questionable tweets. Lamont Hill spoke at the United Nations commemoration of the International Day of Solidarity with Palestinian People on Wednesday and made some eyebrow-raising comments. He said, "We must prioritize peace, but we must not romanticize or fetishize it. We must promote nonviolence at every opportunity, but cannot endorse narrow politics that shames Palestinians for resisting, for refusing to do nothing in ethnic cleansing. Justice requires a free Palestine from the river to the sea." No matter what you say, that statement literally is him saying justice would be the end of the Israeli state. Maybe he's not saying destroy it, but I don't know how else you describe that. He certainly didn't apologize. Lamont Hill called the criticism of his comment silly and noted that the phrase "from the river to the sea" precedes Hamas. This is silly and inaccurate. River to the sea is a phrase that precedes Hamas by more than 50 years. Hamas. It also has a variety of meanings. In my remark, which you clearly didn't hear, I was talking about full citizenship rights in Israel and a redrawing of the pre-1967 border. Sure, that's better than the other statement he made. Lamont Hill has flirted with anti-Semites in the past and recently defended a 2016 photo op with Nation of Islam leader Louis Farrakhan, who has called the Jewish people termites, among other derogatory comments. And then John Levine posted this. The CNN pundit explained away the photo op by contending that the pair discussed Farrakhan's anti-LGBT and anti-Semitic views during the meeting. He said, "The last 24 hours have been crazy. I have been getting challenged from many directions based on an old picture of Louis Farrakhan and me that emerged." Yeah, old as in 2 years ago. "A lot of misrepresentations have been made, so I will speak for myself." Now, I certainly am an expert on being falsely accused of holding views because I interview people, so I can absolutely empathize with Mr. Marc Lamont Hill. So if it's true, he's critical of this person, by all means. He's an activist. There's a difference between someone who's an activist who says something like "from the river to the sea" and then also appears to these people, and someone like me who's a journalist and did like a couple interviews with some people one time. Despite his insistence, they say the photo was being used by Farrakhan to sell music box sets, apparently without Lamont Hill's permission. Lamont Hill said he would ask for it to be taken down as I don't think it's consistent with my values and my professional standards. Despite his insistence that he has principled disagreements with Farrakhan and his organization, the Nation of Islam, Lamont Hill has praised the pastor's leadership in the past. In 2015, a Twitter user asked Lamont Hill if he would support Farrakhan's speech at the Atlanta University Center. Lamont Hill replied simply, "What you need, good brother. Would love to have you attend and also spread the word. I can DM you more details. Thank you, big bro." He said in a quote, he said, he appreciates Minister Farrakhan demanding that we organize and build our own institutions. He's right. He wrote that in 2010. In another 2010 tweet, Lamont Hill insisted that he appreciates much of the Nation of Islam's message, but thinks it's too conservative. Oh my goodness. Yeah, it doesn't fly, buddy. When you go to the UN and you make these statements and you associate with certain people, but then you actually defend them overtly for 8 years, for years. I mean, even 2014. Lamont Hill said it was beautiful to see Nation of Islam among a group of organizations. Lamont Hill has also repeatedly expressed support for convicted cop killers Assata Shakur and Mumia Abu Jamal. Shakur, whose given name was Joanne Deborah Byron, was a member of the Black Liberation Army and was convicted of first-degree murder of a New Jersey state trooper in 1973. Shakur was present with 2 other members of the Black Liberation Army when the police officer was killed, but she claims she took no part in the murder. She later escaped from prison and fled to Cuba. In 2009, Lamont Hill called Shakur his hero and a freedom fighter who he believes to be innocent. Like, at some point, right, the left's extremism comes to roost. The Women's March, Marc Lamont Hill, he made these statements, he was called out for them, and CNN has thus terminated him. But look at how long, 2009, he was making these extremist statements supporting convicted terrorists and cop killers. Now listen, I will say it a million times. Don't outright trust the government, by no means. But this is not an issue of whether or not you support or don't support these individuals like Shakur or whoever the other woman is, Assata Shakur and Mumia Abu Jamal. This is about Marc Lamont's speech being considered extremist and him being fired from a job. I don't think any job has an obligation to employ you. Now, I don't think if you're like, I don't know, if you're a plumber, you should be fired for having bad opinions. But his job is literally to be an opinion guy. He's a commentator. He's a political commentator. So if he's on CNN to express opinions, and it turns out his opinions are, don't align with the values of CNN, by all means, they should get rid of him. I don't think it's that big a deal. But look, he has a right to speak. But CNN has no right to employ him. There's a difference when talking about Twitter and Facebook, because these platforms are key for the average person to debate politics. All right? CNN is not. If you don't like CNN, you can watch Fox News. CNN won't have you on, maybe Fox News will. Granted, there are many opinions that won't be supported by anybody, and that's true. But if you're on Twitter, you're on a platform where Twitter says, come here and say what you want, and then they ban people arbitrarily. CNN is different. CNN hires you, so it's not the same thing. Let's just go to they just end by saying, Lamont Hill also called for freeing Abu Jamal, a former member of the Black Panther Party who was convicted of killing a police officer in 1982. Based on the testimony of 4 witnesses, Abu Jamal's conviction was upheld by the state Supreme Court after multiple appeals. And then he tweeted in 2015, free Mumia with all the, I don't know what that word is. CNN did not respond to a request for comment, but no, he has been fired. Look, I think it's a fine line, but at the same time, I can't expect a company to employ somebody just because I like his opinion, I don't like his opinions, by the way. What I mean is, those questioning whether or not he should have been fired by CNN, yeah, that's not an argument, okay? If you have a public platform, like Twitter, which is privately owned, where they say everyone come here and have a discussion, but then start arbitrarily picking people off, they shouldn't have Section 230 protections. That's different. CNN, they can hire who they want, they can fire who they want. There you go. CNN fired this guy because he's an anti-Semite. Plain and simple. Anyway, stick around. I got more videos coming up in just a few minutes.